Hey guys, Kyle the Death Knight of Anime here, bringing you my review for My Hero Academia Chapter 257. So the chapter starts off pretty strong by giving us an interesting bit of background world building tied to One for All, and yeah, it doesn't shy away from giving us the harsh truth of what happened back then. The era of the earliest holders for of One for All lived in a time where passing on the quirk had very little to do with finding an actual worthy successor and just about preserving the balance and making sure the quirk itself was passed on so that the fight against All for One can continue. Whereas you look at the later to current eras that mentality, like where that mentality still exists, but there is more stability and more heroes within society now, which allowed for like pretty much Nana, All Might, and Izuku the time to actually learn to control the quirk itself. Like there was never a point back then in which they could actually train in order to harness the power properly. It was just all a matter of, okay, we pretty much have to pass on the quirk. We have to do this, otherwise All Might, otherwise all for One is gonna succeed again. So yeah, it really just kind of it's really an interesting like product of the time, so to speak. Um, this also gives an interesting perspective to the mindset that the more control and tighter regulations on quirk, this also gives more interesting mindset of this current society in the sense where it goes without saying that the more control and tighter regulations on quirks have in more than a few ways made the divide among heroes and villains worse. But at the same time, it's understandable why. It's understandable why they wanted to do this. They wanted to do the government and society wanted to do everything they could to prevent in order to prevent like they wanted to do everything they could to prevent society from being engulfed in that same conflict and warlike and warlike scenario again. Um, Now, let's talk about the reveal that the next quirk for Izuku to learn is going to be Nana Shimura's quirk, Float. And I'm kind of of two minds about this one. On one hand, I think it is kind of cool that he's going to learn to fly, and again, just in the fact that it is Nana's quirk could definitely add an interesting dynamic to Izuku's final battle with Shigaraki. Where I do have a bit of a problem with it, however, is that flying in itself is a mobility skill, and I'm worried that all the physical training Izuku has done in order to develop his mobility while using One for All, with him like kind of doing all those quick jumps, those leaps, all that stuff, I'm worried all that's going to get chucked out the window. Having said that, the one out, and how I'm definitely seeing Horikoshi execute this, is Izuku will more than likely integrate the float quirk into his use of One for All and develop a sort of mid-air flight style, kind of like what he's been doing already, but also like a little more reminiscent of Gran Torino's like from style of flying almost. I think that's kind of more or less what we're probably looking at with Izuku like eventually learning to like harness float. But yeah, I'm all for it. I'm just a little worried of basically how Izuku is going to incorporate that into his fighting style. If it's going to like pretty much toss out anything he's learned. But if anything, knowing the way Horikoshi does things, like I said, I think this is probably going to add something to it. Now, one major thing to talk about is that All Might said that he couldn't dig up any information on the second and third users of One for All. And for me, there's two possibilities there. One thought is that the government like scrubbed information on those two when basically reforming society out of the ashes of the world that was before, where basically all for One ruled with an iron fist. Or whatever the hell happened at the end of this chapter happened with those two, which, yeah, let's let's talk about that because obviously whatever's going on, whatever's going to happen next to make heroes disappear is playing into Shigaraki's warning, and the stage does feel like it's being set for the climax. But the question is how this is going to happen because it might just be an artistic choice, but the last page does seem to indicate that there's some kind of energy washing over the city. So so whatever happens next, I imagine what like the fact that we cut to the doctor like immediately onto that next page tells me he has something to do with this. Like he's preparing for pretty much Shigaraki in order to deliver the final blow to this society in some way. And getting back to like heroes disappearing and how this possibly could affect the second and third users. It would it's an interesting one thing that really kind of one thing that really kind of makes me think that whatever like from that All For One did back then. One thing that makes me really think that they disappeared too is basically is whatever Shigaraki probably is going to do in terms of making heroes disappear is probably the same thing that pretty much All For One did to pretty much the second and third ones because it would have been easy in order to hide their like if he did make them disappear at that time it would have been easy in order to hide because or hide the fact that he killed them because there was really no record keeping back then I think. Aside from that, though, we basically also get a nice scene of basically All Might and Izuku just kind of talking, and again, it's one of those conversations where the context really worries me at this because I got no clue where Horikoshi will take All Might in the future. I mean, at this point, it makes sense if Horikoshi were to do a time skip that All Might would be killed, but right now Horikoshi seems to be largely bypassing any kind of time skip right now. So yeah, it's like I'm it's one of those things where he keeps us going with the whole like I'm optimistic but also kind of worried. I don't I in that sense I guess it's kind of I guess I gotta commend him for just kind of making us say yeah I got no idea where you're going with this Horikoshi. The other thing with the conversation though is that we learn All Might wanted to speak to Stain, and that is a conversation I need to happen because we all know how much Stain holds All Might in high regard. So this is something that weirdly needs some manner of closure. Like it's one of those things where even though from what we know All Might and Stain have never officially met. This is one of those things where it still feels like it needs to happen in order for some manner of closure and whatnot. So yeah, it'll be good in order like I guess what I mean is it'll be good for like in order for All Might to pretty much meet Stain in order just in order to kind of like talk face to face and kind of hash things out about pretty much why pretty much Stain does what he does and get a deeper understanding of why Stain does what he does and possibly even a bit more of a thorough backstory on him. Like I think yeah, the possibilities of how a conversation between All Might and Stain could go are honestly kind of endless, and I'm kind of excited to see where that's going to go. Of course, and of course of course we pretty much also get the just kind of the UA students just kind of at the dorm just kind of like just kind of being students again, and again it's little moments like that just kind of remind us how just that like they're heroes in training obviously, but they're still allowed to have these like human moments kind of thing. And in general, I think that's the best way in order to describe this chapter is that it was basically a bunch of heroes having human moments. So yeah, But yeah, guys, that's all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Mr. Crunchyroll. Death Knight of Anime, signing off. Later, guys.